My parents made me work for everything while my brother got handouts. Now they need me to save them. The graduation gift that changed everything. I always knew my parents favored Ryan. Ever since we were kids, he was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. If I got a B in school, I was scolded for not trying hard enough. If Ryan got a C, they laughed it off. Not everyone is good at academics, sweetie. If I wanted a new video game, I had to save up my allowance for months to buy it myself. Ryan? He just had to ask once. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that it was just how things were. But the truth? The truth hit me like a truck on the day of Ryan's college graduation. The setup, two brothers, two very different lives. By the time we were in college, it was blatantly obvious how different our lives were. Heavy checkmark Ryan had everything handed to him. Our parents paid for his tuition, covered his rent, and even gave him a monthly allowance so he wouldn't have to work while studying. Heavy checkmark me? I had to do everything myself. Student loans, late-night shifts, cheap off-campus apartments filled with roommates I barely knew. Ryan never worked a single day in his life. He spent his weekends partying, buying expensive clothes, and bragging about how stressful his life was. I barely had time to breathe. And then came graduation day, the gift that broke me. I still remember standing there, wearing my wrinkled suit from Goodwill, exhausted after pulling a double shift the night before just to afford gas for the trip. Our parents had insisted on throwing a huge celebration for Ryan's graduation. They rented out a fancy venue, invited all of his friends, even hired a professional photographer. They never did that for me. When I graduated 2 years earlier, I got a simple dinner at home with a grocery store cake. No party, no speech, not even a single picture. But I swallowed my pride and told myself it was fine. I was here to support my brother. That's what family does. Then, my dad cleared his throat, raising his glass with a proud smile. Ryan, son, we are so incredibly proud of you. To see you walk across that stage today, it was the greatest moment of our lives. Greatest moment? Hadn't I graduated too? I forced a smile and clapped politely as everyone cheered. Ryan grinned, basking in the attention. Then my dad turned to him, pulling a small black box from his pocket. Your mother and I wanted to give you something special to celebrate this milestone. Ryan opened the box, and Jesus Christ. Inside were the keys to a brand new luxury car, a BMW. My heart dropped. The room exploded in cheers. Ryan jumped up, laughing in shock. No way. No freaking way. I felt like I couldn't breathe. A car? They got him a brand new car? And then my mom turned to me, smiling. And Ethan, sweetie, we didn't forget about you. For a moment, I felt hope. Maybe they were going to make things right. Maybe, just maybe, they finally saw how unfair they had been. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small white envelope. I took it with shaky hands, feeling everyone's eyes on me. Slowly, I opened it. Inside, a $50 Amazon gift card. I stared at it, my fingers gripping the thin piece of plastic. A car for Ryan. A $50 gift card for me. My dad laughed. You can buy something nice for yourself, kiddo. Something inside me snapped. The moment I knew I was done, I wish I could say I handled it gracefully, that I smiled, thanked them, and let it go. But I didn't. Instead, I laughed. Loudly, bitterly. A sharp, humorless sound that made the whole room go silent. Ryan looked at me, confused. Dude, what's so funny? I shook my head, feeling my pulse pound in my ears. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just done. Nothing, I said, slipping the gift card back into the envelope. I was just thinking, this is perfect, really. It sums up everything about this family in one moment. My mom frowned. Ethan, don't be dramatic. Dramatic? I repeated. You just gave my brother a luxury car, and you handed me a gift card like I'm some distant relative you barely know. Ryan rolled his eyes. Dude, chill. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. Not a big deal. I exhaled slowly, nodding to myself. You know what? I said, forcing a smile. You're right. It's not a big deal. Because after today, I'm done. My mom's face twisted in confusion. Done with what? I looked at her, then at my dad, then at Ryan. Done with this. Done with being the backup son. Done with working my ass off while you hand everything to Ryan on a silver platter. Done with pretending this family gives a damn about me. The room went dead silent. Ethan, my dad started, but I was already walking toward the door. Where are you going? My mom called after me. Anywhere but here, I said, not looking back, leaving it all behind. I left that night and never went back. I cut contact completely. Heavy check mark, no more family gatherings. Heavy check mark, no more answering their calls. Heavy check mark, no more pretending I didn't know exactly where I stood in that house. At first, they didn't believe me. They thought I was just being emotional and that I'd come back eventually. But I didn't. Instead, I built my own life. Heavy check mark, I worked my ass off. No handouts, no help, just pure determination. Heavy check mark, I became successful on my own terms. I got my own car, my own home. Everything I had, I earned. Heavy check mark, and I never looked back. Years passed. Then one day, the calls started coming in again. Ryan was in trouble, and for the first time in their lives, my parents needed me. The golden child's fall and my parents' desperation. For years after I walked away, I didn't look back. No calls, no visits, no checking in to see how they were doing. At first, they didn't seem to care. They probably assumed I'd come crawling back eventually, like I always had. That I'd forgive them, fall back into my role as the responsible one, the backup son who worked hard while Ryan reaped the rewards. But that's the thing about people like them. They never realize what they had until it's gone. And by the time they did, it was far too late. Ryan's downfall begins. The first sign that things weren't going as planned came about a year after I left. I got a message from an old friend, someone who still kept in touch with people from my hometown. "Dude, have you heard about Ryan?" I hadn't. I had deleted, blocked, and erased everything tied to that life. "Your parents cut him off. Apparently, he blew through all their money, and now they're struggling." Wild, right? I stared at my phone for a long moment. Ryan? Cut off? That didn't make sense. Ryan was their golden child. They had spent their entire lives handing him everything on a silver platter. And yet, here he was, broke, alone, and realizing, for the first time in his life, that actions have consequences. How it all fell apart. I didn't know all the details at first, but over time, I started piecing things together. Heavy checkmark, Ryan blew through his graduation gift. That fancy BMW? He wrecked it within 6 months. Drunk driving. Totaled. My parents paid for the damages, of course, but the insurance rates skyrocketed and the car was gone. Heavy checkmark, he flunked out of multiple jobs. Since Ryan had never worked before, he had no work ethic. He'd get a job, show up late, slack off, get fired, then blame everyone but himself. Heavy checkmark, he got scammed. At some point, he tried to start a business, probably thinking it was easy, like everything else in his life. He put everything my parents gave him into it, and lost it all. And just like that, the golden child was out of money. And my parents? They had nothing left to give him. The calls start coming in. It started slowly. A random number ringing my phone one afternoon. I didn't answer. Then another. Then a text. "Mom, Ethan, please call us. It's important." I ignored it. Then my dad tried. "Dad, son, we need to talk. Call me back." Son. That word made me laugh. I had spent my whole life being treated like the lesser child, the one who never got the same love or respect. And now I was their son. I blocked their numbers. But they didn't stop. Emails, voicemails, even messages through random relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. And finally, Ryan himself. Ryan's pathetic plea. One day, I was walking out of my office when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but something told me to pick up. "Ethan," Ryan's voice. I almost laughed out loud. "Didn't expect to hear from you," I said, unlocking my car. "Let me guess, Mom and Dad put you up to this." He hesitated. For the first time in his life, he sounded unsure of himself. "No. I mean, yeah, they want to talk to you. But I also just wanted to reach out." I leaned against my car, letting the silence drag out. "And why's that?" Another pause. Then, "Look, man, I know things weren't fair growing up." I raised an eyebrow. "No shit. I get that you're mad," he continued. "And I don't blame you. But things have been rough for us. Dad lost his job. Mom's been trying to hold things together, but it's bad, Ethan. And me? Well, He stopped. I could hear the shame in his voice. "You what?" I pressed. A deep breath. "I need help." There it was. The moment I had waited years for. The sweetest revenge, doing nothing. Ryan continued talking, rambling about how hard things had been, how my parents had made mistakes, how he was trying to be better. But I wasn't really listening, because the truth was, I didn't care. I didn't care about his struggles. I didn't care that my parents had lost everything. I didn't care that Ryan was finally feeling the pain I had felt my entire life. "You still there?" he asked, his voice small. I smiled. "Yeah, I'm here. Just thinking." "Thinking about what?" "About how funny this is." Silence. "Funny," he echoed. "Yeah," I said. "You spent your whole life coasting. Mom and Dad gave you everything. You never worked, never struggled, never lifted a damn finger while I broke my back trying to survive. And now? Now you finally know what that feels like." I could hear the panic creeping into his voice. "Ethan, come on, man. We're family." I laughed, shaking my head. "No, Ryan, we're not." And then I hung up. The aftermath. After that call, they tried a few more times. Emails, messages, even letters. They begged, pleaded, tried to guilt trip me, but I never responded. Because the truth was, I had already won. Ryan, the golden child, was struggling to survive. My parents had lost everything. And me? I was finally, truly free. The final closure, running into Ryan years later. Years passed. I built a life completely separate from them. A life they were never meant to be part of. I thrived in ways they never expected, ways they never believed I could. And through it all, I never once looked back. Until one random afternoon, I saw Ryan again. And for the first time, he wasn't the golden child anymore. A familiar face in an unfamiliar place. It happened at a coffee shop downtown. I was finishing up some work, sipping my drink, when I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years. "Ryan, order for Ryan." I froze. It wasn't the name that got me. It was the hesitation in the voice that responded. "Oh yeah? That's me." Slowly, I turned. And there he was. But not the Ryan I remembered. What time had done to him? Ryan looked rough. Heavy checkmark his expensive clothes? Gone. Now he wore a faded hoodie, sneakers with holes in them, and jeans that had definitely seen better days. Heavy checkmark his confident posture? Gone. He hunched slightly, shoulders tense, as if he was carrying the weight of the world on his back. Heavy checkmark the spark in his eyes? Gone. There was nothing but exhaustion and quiet desperation. This wasn't the privileged kid who had laughed in my face, telling me to chill when I confronted our parents' favoritism. This was a man who had been crushed by life. And the best part? I had nothing to do with it. He sees me. At first, Ryan didn't notice me. He grabbed his coffee, stuffing the change into his pocket, moving like someone who was just trying to get through the day. Then, as he turned toward the door, our eyes met. His face froze. For a second, he looked like he might walk right past me, like he thought I'd ignore him, pretend we were strangers. But then, he changed his mind. He walked over. The conversation that changed everything. "Ethan." He said my name like he wasn't sure if he had the right to. Like he wasn't sure if I'd even acknowledge him. I raised an eyebrow. "Ryan." He hesitated. "Can I sit?" I leaned back in my chair, giving him a long, slow look. A few years ago, I would have dreamed of this moment. I would have fantasized about seeing Ryan broken, humbled, struggling. I would have imagined this exact conversation, where he came crawling back, admitting he was wrong. And now that it was here, I felt nothing. "Do whatever you want," I said. He sat. For a moment, he just stared at his coffee, as if trying to find the right words. "You look good," he finally said. "Successful." I smirked. "I am." He nodded, exhaling. He looked nervous. "Listen, man. He stopped. Started again. "I know I wasn't a good brother. And I know Mom and Dad." He trailed off, shaking his head. I said nothing. "I didn't get it back then," he continued. "How unfair it all was. I was so used to getting everything handed to me. I never thought about what that meant for you." I took a sip of my coffee, waiting. "But after you left," he swallowed. "Everything fell apart. Mom and Dad," he shook his head again. "They tried to hold it together, but they couldn't. And me? I didn't know how to survive without them." I tilted my head slightly. "And what? You expect me to feel sorry for you?" Ryan flinched. "No. I mean," he sighed. "I don't know. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Closure. But not forgiveness." I studied him carefully. For the first time in his life, Ryan was being honest. He wasn't manipulating. He wasn't looking for a handout. He was just admitting the truth. And yet, I still didn't care. "You're sorry," I repeated, my voice calm. "And what exactly does that change?" He looked down. He didn't have an answer. "Listen, Ryan," I continued. "I'm glad you finally understand. But the thing is, I moved on. I don't need your apology. I don't need anything from you." He nodded slowly. "I figured you'd say that." "Good." I said, standing up. Because I mean it. For a second, he looked like he wanted to say something else. Maybe to ask for another chance, maybe to try and fix things. But he didn't. Because deep down, he already knew it was too late. So instead, he just watched as I walked away. And for the first time, I felt truly free. Final thought. Ryan thought he could coast through life forever. He thought his privilege would always protect him. That no matter what, he'd always have our parents, their money, their support. But when they lost everything, he realized too late that he had nothing. And me? I had built a life they were never part of. And I was happier than ever.